Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to your Monday edition of Pelicans Daily, brought to you by FanArch. I'm your host, David Grubb, editor in chief of thebirdrights.com. And we'll start today with the dynamic between new Pelicans executive vice president of basketball operations, Joe Dumars, and Pelicans head coach, Willie Green. Now, what's interesting is usually when uh, there's a power struggle within an organization and one person outlasts the other in that struggle, that person you would presume has power, has won the power struggle. Yet, with Willie Green seemingly winning his power struggle with David Griffin, I'm not sure how big a winner Willie Green is. Now, certainly, he's the one who gets to stay in New Orleans. He wants to be the head coach of the Pelicans. Those things are still in his favor. But with Griffin gone and with Dumars in, and Griffin and Dumars having to do something dramatic with this team, whether he's operating under the edict of trading Zion Williamson or not, but he's got to win. Willie Green is not particularly in a position of power. His seat is still hot. It's just it wasn't his time. And I think that part is the most frustrating part for a lot of Pelicans fans, is that this feels a bit like deja vu. When the GM or the executive in charge of basketball operations, however the power structure is within an organization, has their coach forced upon them, how long do those relationships seemingly last? We have talked this offseason about alignment, about having your organization from the ownership to your basketball people to the court, everybody being pointed towards the same goals, everybody on the same mission. And the New Orleans Pelicans have struggled with that ever since they got to New Orleans under two different ownership groups, under several different basketball leaders. This organization has had a problem with staying focused on its overall mission and having everyone in peace, every piece in place, focused and working towards a common goal. So now you have Joe Dumars who's coming into a situation that feels like he's got to clean something up. You usually don't take over someone's job if everything is rosy. So you're coming in to clean something up. And yet, this big part of the mess, however it's viewed as a contributor, you can't touch, at least not initially. So for a while, this big stain is staying in the middle of the carpet, but you've got to clean everything else around it. I don't know if you're going to put a plant on top of that stain. I don't know if you're going to, move a table over there, throw a rug over it, but it's there. And everyone knows it's there. But you somehow have to deal with it, get the rest of the room clean, and not touch that portion. That's difficult. Even if you like the person, even if you respect the person, even if you think that they're capable of doing a good job, you didn't hire them. And your fate is tied to theirs, their success. If, I mean, look, here's the natural inclination for people. If Willie Green were to turn it around and all of a sudden become a top five coach in the NBA, let's say, and the Pelicans start progressing deep into the playoffs and those types of things, in this hypothetical situation, human beings tend to get jealous when things come out and say, Willie Green was here before Joe Dumars. How much of an impact did Dumars have? And how much is Willie really on Willie Green? And vice versa. Willie Green didn't win before Joe Dumars got here. Did Dumars figure things out and is Green just along for the ride? And you could say most people's egos are good about these things, but human beings are human beings, and that's just the way things go. So this is why executives tend to be tied to their own coaching candidates. And Joe Dumars, in his career, has shown that he's willing to move on from a coach. He had 9 of them in 14 seasons with the Pistons. Just a reminder, 9 of them in 14 seasons with the Pistons as a head coach. So that's 1.3 coaches per season. I mean, one coach for every, 1 1/3 seasons. That's not a good track record of hiring and firing coaches. It doesn't make you think that Willie Green's here for the long haul. It makes you wonder what his long term future is going to be. Because either the Pelicans retain, the only way you get immediate success is if you retain Zion Williamson. If you trade him, whether you want to trade him or not, you know that there's going to be a rebuild. You understand that. You get it. If you're for trading him, you're good with it already. And I have no problem with that. If you're against trading him, you may be against another long rebuild. But that's the outcome regardless. So if that's the case, betting on Willie Green, it just seems like you wonder why you would do this because it feels like eventually he's going to get fired. If you get the number one pick, we've already talked about the track record of just coaches do not last with number one picks. Let's we have the Pelicans as a perfect example of that. Whether it was Anthony Davis and you moved on and he had two coaches in his tenure with the Pelicans in his 7 years. If you talk about Zion Williamson, he's had three coaches in his 6 seasons. So Willie Green's not going to last if you get the number one pick. History tells you that. If you don't get the number one pick and you're forced into a position where you may want to trade it if it's further down in the first round, if it's outside of that top three, top four, then and you trade Zion Williamson, then you're dealing with a good player that fans are not quite as excited over, who's going to need a little bit more time to develop, maybe. And are Pelicans fans going to be okay sitting and watching Willie Green because of the roster now configuration lose 50 games for the next 2 seasons, 3 seasons while you rebuild this thing? I don't think they will. So this is just a very difficult position for everyone to be in because the only path for Willie Green to be successful, the only path in the short term is to keep Zion Williamson because Willie Green is not going to, there's no way the team is going to win in the short term if you trade Zion Williamson. Now, in the long term, are the Pelicans going to be patient enough to give Willie Green 4, 5, 6 more seasons? You talk about a, you know, getting to 8, 9, 10 years on the bench without winning. And how does that make them look around the league if they just say we're going to keep retaining him and we haven't won anything? Does that send a message that the Pelicans are an organization that's not willing to do what it takes to really win? That they're content with having someone. And again, this is not about who Willie Green actually is. This is about perception. And are the Pelicans fine with? And I think that the question that a lot of people that the answer to that question for a lot of people right now is just yes, that they are. But are they fine with being perceived as an organization that is not willing to do what it takes to win? As long as they're able to control the narrative, as long as they're able to make sure that they are not getting negative headlines about the operation and the organization. As long as that's not the case and they are relatively competitive along the lines of teams like the Atlanta Hawks or something like that, where you're fighting for 7, 8, 9, 10 every year. If that's the situation you want to be in, if that's the way the Pelicans want to be, as long as they're getting 7, 8, 9, 10 every season, if they're hanging in that play in, and they think that that's enough to keep fans coming to games into March, then if that's the case, it's going to be difficult being a Pels fan over the next few seasons. So the draft, I think, and as we focused on, is going to be the biggest decider for what the Pelicans do, I believe. If you win the lottery, you know exactly what's happening. The New Orleans Pelicans are taking Cooper Flag at number one, if that's what happens. At number two, they're taking Dylan Harper. There's no question there. Well, and I think the jokes just write themselves because somebody's saying the Pistons could have known what they could have done at number two, and Joe Dumars took Darko Milicic. I'm not going to comment on that. But yes, you would think that if the Pelicans are drafting number two, that they would take Dylan Harper. But let's say they don't. Let's say you fall farther from the top and you're forced in a position to draft a player. What do the Pelicans need in this upcoming draft? Uh, first of all, I think we all understand the Pelicans are constantly on a search for shooting. If we were talking about the shooters on this roster as currently instructed, it's CJ McCollum, it's Trey Murphy, and to an extent, um, Antonio Reeves, and then to an extent, Brandon Boston, who showed some streaky tendencies as a three-point shooter, but not a great shooter, but willing to take them at volume, which is something that the Pelicans have lacked. Ball handling still certainly an issue. You don't really have someone who can take care of initiating the offense when you don't have a true point guard on the floor. CJ McCollum operates in a one-on-one space, but not really a distributor and a ball handler with as a creator. Jose Alvarado still limitations due to his size, though he's improved. And with, you look at Jose Alvarado, his value, I think, again, and we've talked about this before, is underrated. Playmaking in the half court, certainly something. Again, we talked about the lack of point guard option for this team and rim protection. Izmisi gave a valiant effort last season, but his size, his lack of true physical size, has been a problem so far. Karla Makovich, not a rim protector. Kelly Olynyk, not a rim protector. So the Pelicans certainly need some that intimidation factor up front. This is a team that teams were quite um, teams were able to score quite easily around the basket against the New Orleans Pelicans on a nightly basis. You saw that. You saw whether once they got past the initial level of defense, which it wasn't great either on the perimeter. Once they got to the paint, teams really didn't have a struggle against the Pelicans defense at all. Outside from the athletic play that would come from a chase down block from Carlo or a good block by Misi, there just was no rim protection. You look at, Dylan Harper, I think, again, solves more of your problems than anybody else outside of Cooper Flag. Though I think if you do fall a little lower, Connor Knipple out of Duke is also somebody that I like. He makes good decisions, shoots the ball well from the perimeter, can finish at the basket, plays defense, does all those things. So those are players that you could look out for. A guy that continues to get paired with the Pelicans a lot is Trey Johnson, the shooter, a guy who is much more of an off ball, I think, scorer. He can handle the ball some. I don't know if he can initiate offense, but the Pelicans do need, there are certain roles on a team that you just got to have, and instant offense is one of those. And I don't know who the Pelicans would count on that off the bench right now. Certainly, if CJ McCollum comes back, you'd like to see him transition to that role. Where I think, the frustration that fans have at time that CJ over dribbles and dominates the ball, you're concerned less with that with the second unit because you need someone to be aggressive. And that's too often the Pelicans don't have somebody who's just going to attack and put points on the board from the reserve role. I think CJ would be fine with that as long as he knows it's consistent and that the Pelicans are trying to win. If the Pelicans do change course and again make that trade, you trade Zion Williamson, then there's no reason to keep CJ McCollum. But we'll talk about more about that in a moment. Um, because when you're discussing the trade plans, I think the first thing that people talk about is Zion Williamson, and that's the biggest concern: is Zion going to be traded? And there are going to be two distinct camps. There are going to be people who, and I understand both. I understand those folks who say that they want to move on from Zion Williamson. I get it. Do I agree with them? I'm saying no, I don't agree with them, but I'm not. I don't think that they've come to a bad conclusion. They have every right to that conclusion. Mine is based on history. Theirs is based on frustration and the fact that, look, just quite obviously, if he's not around, if he's not committed to it, then cut the cord. And it is a valid position to take. I don't, again, given all the information, there are two options to come to, two conclusions to come to, and both of them have their valid cases. Um, I think that the Pelicans are going to, again, wait until they find out what happens with the draft lottery. But I also think that you've done damage to your position. And there are folks who say, well, knowing that Zion is available means that there can be a bidding war for Zion. There will not be a bidding war for Zion Williamson. There will not be a bidding for Zion Williamson. because teams do not want to get into a bidding war for what they view as damaged goods. There's a price that they are willing to pay, and every team has an understanding of but that varies so much from team to team. There are teams that say Zion is worth a conditional first round pick and maybe a semi decent player. If you get the Brandon Ingram haul for Zion Williamson, I think you're disappointed in that. And is that worth giving him up? And again, there are people who will come to the conclusion, yes, just get rid of the problem. I think that the bigger problem for the Pelicans and for fans is not even the process of getting to, I want to trade Zion Williamson or I don't. The bigger problem is, do you think the Pelicans can execute the right deal? Do you think the New Orleans Pelicans will make an intelligent, thoughtful deal when it comes to Zion Williamson, and a deal that ultimately sets the franchise up for future success? That part is a lot harder to get to because if I think he's staying, do I trust the Pelicans to put the pieces around him to win? Well, we've been 6 years through that, and we've seen them fail in a lot of ways. In some ways, they've succeeded, but building the organization around him was a failure because they never committed to it. Their relationship with their franchise players is a bit of a failure because of the way it started, where they didn't set clear boundaries for him and put him in a position to be a professional, and try to break some of his childish tendencies early on. They didn't do that because they wanted to be liked, and that falls on David Griffin and others. But the failure initially is on both sides. Zion has to own his part of it, his lack of professionalism, his lack of commitment to being a basketball player, his lack of understanding what it means to be a franchise player and a leader. He's got to own all those things. The question is this an irreparable marriage? Are there irreconcilable differences? Does it have to end? And then, do you trust the New Orleans Pelicans to make the right move? Do you trust Joe Dumars to make the right move? And there are a lot of questionable trades on Joe Dumars' ledger while with the Pistons. You wonder how many of those are spurred, of course, by trying to hold on to an aging roster as you're trying to get back to championship glory. There's some bad deals made, but then post the breakup of that team, some very bad contracts and deals made. Then you put the New Orleans Pelicans and Gail Benson and Dennis Lauscha and all these folks, and you put them around Joe Dumars and not knowing what parameters do exist. Are they the type of ownership group that will help him or hurt him in trying to do his job? That remains to be seen. But that question, if anyone within the organization who operates truly gets the ability to do the job as they see fit, or does ownership make it impossible for anyone to come in and truly have success in New Orleans? If you get another major failure here with Joe Dumars, I think the answer is clear that ownership has to either change the way it does business or change completely. And if they can't see that they need to change the way they operate, then they need to step away from this because it's clearly not their thing. And you can enter into a business and not know what you're doing. Basketball is not football. There's a logical reason why you're not as good at it. But ultimately, your organizational direction comes from your attitude towards your team, towards this fan base, towards your players, towards success. And I think we all have to do some internal recalibration and recalculation sometimes, look at ourselves and say, what are we about? And the Pelicans are in a position where they've got to do that this offseason and decide what they're about and who are the kinds of players that they want to fulfill the mission of winning an NBA championship for the people of Louisiana. If the Pelicans do make trades this offseason, who are the most likely players to be moved? Well, as you look at the roster, I think certainly outside of Zion Williamson, if he is gone, who's most likely to be traded? You look at CJ McCollum, who makes $30.6 million in this upcoming season. If Zion goes, CJ McCollum becomes candidate number two um, to go. Their futures are connected no matter what in this scenario. You, you don't CJ doesn't deserve it to hang around, um, and be forced to be part of a rebuild if you trade Zion Williamson. And I think if you're trying to bottom out, the best thing to do is to send CJ out and get a pick for him. Try to get a player who can, again, that you can get off of a contract early if you're swapping one expiring contract for another, just to for multiple pieces in order to get a pick back. That's fine. Do that, but do not keep CJ McCollum as part of a rebuild. I think again, if you're trading Zion Williamson, then DeJounte Murray's got to go too, injured or not. His future is over in New Orleans if Zion Williamson is gone, and a lot of these are connected to Zion Williamson. If Zion is gone, all the vets got to go. You're moving Kelly Olynyk because there may be a championship caliber franchise looking for a role player. I'm moving Kelly Olynyk and I'm getting what I can get, and you're taking it on in the form you have to take the Oklahoma City approach. Then, if you're going to bottom out, you don't tank and bottom out by taking on taking on bad players. What you do is you're looking for bad contracts that teams will pay you to take off their hands by giving you additional talent, by giving you additional picks. The Pelicans have to get into the position of getting assets if they're going into a rebuild. The guys you keep are your cheap young players. You're keeping your Yves Misi, you're keeping your Jose Alvarado, who can give you starter minutes at bench prices. Carlo Makovich is cheap. He stays. Antonio Reeves is cheap. He stays. You keep those guys, but you move on and you trade your high cost veteran players if you're going into a rebuild. That's where the Pelicans, have to focus. If you don't, if you don't go into a rebuild this offseason, if you decide you're going to rebuild around Zion Williamson, if that's the goal, then to me, your top trade players are again, if I can upgrade at the center position and include Olynyk, or I can include Jordan Hawkins in any deal to get me get improvement in my backcourt or the front court. Those are the two that I have. Jeremiah Robinson, Earl, free agent. Bruce Brown, free agent. I can't get rid of them. I don't have a lot of money to move on from. But the one thing I can't give away is all my shooting with Trey Murphy injured right now. So CJ McCollum, he stays if I'm building around Zion, at least until the trade deadline. I'm looking to move him then if we're not progressing on the court. But to me, CJ McCollum's value is attached directly to Zion Williamson. Everyone else, it's hard to trade. If you're keeping Zion, you don't trade Herb Jones. Dejounte Murray is a problem just because of his injury status. You have to wait until you find out if he's healthy as to when you can move him. But you're certainly attached to five guys if you keep Zion. CJ, again for the short term, Herb, Trey, and Jose. And then I would also say, Carlo and Antonio would stay in that situation, and Misi in the short term. You're trying to upgrade the roster, but I'm saying that is your short term, your 25, 26 core that you would be looking to build around in that case. It doesn't give you a lot of room on the perimeter to rebuild. But I would say this, if you're just, and again, I understand the grumbling under your breaths when I say this, but If your starters play 65 games each, you're at least a 500 squad. If you're the New Orleans Pelicans, you are at least getting to 500. So that's you're not trying to win a championship in year one with Dumars. You'd be looking forward in year two to go all in what you've assessed, what you have on this roster. So I would think that just getting back to 500, getting back to that potential to be in the play-in, would be the job this upcoming season. Fix the culture, get things right. If you have Zion Williamson, what you're trying to do is just get everything reset and feel like you're moving forward. And then year two, would be the year you go all in for a championship. All right. Tuesday is the Joe Dumars press conference. So we'll have a show before that, but we'll also have one after, where I'll discuss what went on there. I'm looking forward to being there. I'm looking forward to asking my questions. We'll see how many um, I get to ask, but certainly I'll have an opportunity to ask something, and hopefully we have some answers for you. Until then, y'all have a great day. Enjoy this Monday. And until the next time, make sure you like, you comment, you subscribe, share it with other Pelicans fans. Don't forget to follow me. I'm on Blue Sky usually, but also on Instagram. And don't forget to visit thebirdrights.com for more information about your New Orleans Pelicans.